then a business policy. What is it you have going which can allow you to really do something which makes sense? So he found out what is a unique consumer initiative. We now can call it CRM or any word you want to call it. Obviously there was no money, so there was no question of bribing any doctors to get business. But the way to do it which he found and which really helped the company was to come out with unique products. Products which required a kind of association with the consumer, which was the doctor. So he got suggestions from the doctors. In those days, the regulatory climate in India was such that your idea itself was enough for you to get a license. You didn't really have to go through all the rigmarole now which the world puts all the industry through. And then he would go to the doctors and say, sir, this is your suggestion, this is the product we have. And obviously that made a huge connect. And therefore, in those days, what really helped was, I think, a factor of trying to come out with newer solutions to ailments which at that point of time were not being treated the way they needed to. Example in point was tropical eosinophilia and filariasis. Diethyl carbamazine citrate was a given up product because the multinationals could not patent them. So he decided to take this product and try to use it for a condition called tropical eosinophilia. And that became successful, and that is how the starting started. One of our products which today is giving us a fair amount of turnover, but of course has been now superseded by many other products, was Unienzyme. Unienzyme was something which was taught to my father as a combination by a doctor from Nadiad, Dr. I.G. Patel, way back in 1950s. And the idea to look at that time was that whatever is the requirement in terms of a typical feeling of indigestion or not feeling comfortable. In India, we have got a multiple diets. We've got allergy which takes place because of the food we eat. As they say, there's an old saying, one man's meat is another man's poison. And clearly, then he developed this whole concept by putting all kinds of what you may call like a Hajmola Churan. Everything was kind of put into that. This might help for this, so therefore we will use this. The person needs to have a good bowel movement, therefore he needs this product or she needs it. So in the morning she has the feeling. You know, every Indian gets up in the morning, the first thought is, am I going to the loo or not? Otherwise the day is not good. So these were some of the psychologies which he was able to play on, became very successful. But there were certain issues which came out of this. And so while we were leaders in new products, new as I defined what I meant by new, it was not new that it was path-breaking research, but it was new in terms of the applications. We became a very respected name with the medical fraternity because in those times he was able to make this one-on-one connect. And also he did a lot of personal efforts by going to the medical colleges, trying to start medical education in the sense, printing diagnostic charts, printing diagnostic handbooks, so that young students who had to appear for their exams started relying on Unichem charts and Unichem handbooks, which helped them really to do well. And obviously as a part of that, it also became a very good business sense. So the first years of 44 to 1960 was this what I call the launch of Unichem and this slow but steady takeoff. There were certain principles which were enshrined right from the beginning. Having the first office near Mahalakshmi Temple at Bombay, if you see our monogram, it's got the Mahalakshmi Temple pillars. And these pillars, for us, have represented and always represent the qualities of quality and reliability. Now this was something which was enshrined way back in 44. And one of the learnings which I would share with you, that there are certain core values and ethics which we need to keep as an organization, irrespective of whatever are the time changes, because there has to be a genetic DNA which would allow you to really operate. Otherwise, if you get swept with the times, you have issues with that. So clearly, this is what I call the lesson of entrepreneurial spirit, the lesson of not saying no, building and nurturing relationships, and at the same time making sure that you are adding something and you get the benefit of the profit as a difference between the service which is perceived by the people compared to what you charge. His philosophy has always been, we have to serve the society we exist in. Otherwise, it is also very interesting business sense, because otherwise you will always have only a short-term perspective. All of this take me now to 1962. So we've tried to cover 18 years in about 3 minutes or 5 minutes. So we now come to 1962, where understand India was a very heavy tax regime. It's not as nice as now, where possibly we have one of the lowest personal taxations in the world. At that time we were slapped with estate duties, wealth tax, because obviously the Nehruvian philosophy was it was easier for people to take away the rich man's money rather than to make the poor people feel more affordable. So again, the lack of funds, he decided to float this company and converted this proprietorship directly into a public limited company, which was called Unichem Laboratories Limited. He did not consult very smart taxation people, who ideally would have suggested that we should first have made it a private limited company, got shares issued, and in the process then finally had small dilutions over a period of time. So the public money which would have come in would have allowed us actually to keep control without really having to pay anything, and that would have helped to increase the resource base of the organization. For some smart reason, he decided directly to go from proprietary to public, and 50% of the shares of the company were given to us by way of our goodwill. Okay? And then the beautiful thing started. Before we went public, there was the Chinese emergency when India went to war with China. All the underwriters in those days who had underwritten our stock backed out. And just 4 days before the issue, he didn't know what he should do. So he once again used his clout to go to the chemists and doctors. And in those days, in the time of the controller of capital issues, when it was very difficult to really market your stock or price it according to what the consumer felt or what they felt would be the value, we were oversubscribed 3.5 times. And that was something which basically made us feel that there is something going in this company which, if leveraged properly, can take us to the next level. The other issue which happened was because of these irrational tax policies. And my father always believed that the more money you make, unless you utilize it for good purposes, his son is only going to become bad. And therefore it's better to pay the taxes. And in that process, what happened was that we lost even that 50% because we had to mortgage our shares to be able to pay tax. And so while the other companies were benefiting from all the value they were able to get and get related, we were in a different spiral where actually we had to cling on to try to keep the control in the company. Fortunately, in those days, sales of brands, sale of companies was not known. That's how we survived. Otherwise, somebody at that time with a market cap of less than 5 crores could have bought us over, and I would have been possibly some professor here trying to find some job somewhere. But clearly, this was the situation in which we were. However, what also happened is you have Larry Grander's very famous understanding. Every evolution breeds its own revolution. And you need to have different things done at different times. There is never a question that anything you do is right or wrong. It's in the context in which it is done which plays a very important part. And Unichem is one classical instance of contextually having lost certain opportunities and also contextually having gained certain opportunities. And so what I'm presenting to you is a mixed bag of, I would say, a combo of some successes, some failures, but at the end of the day, everything in life is a learning. And I thought it is much better to talk frankly about what we've gone through and what our young people can learn out of this rather than to glorify anything. So therefore, the issues now which happened was, here my father had kind of virtually gained industry status. He was called into every council everywhere possible. Government was asking his advice, everything. And we got surrounded by a group of relatives, because in those days professionals were hard to come by. So we had this paternalistic yes man kind of approach. I was not anywhere in the scene because they took long years to conceive me. I don't know why they conceived me, but anyway they did. But this was nearly 19 years after marriage. And he was so worried that one was bad enough that he decided no more, which was good for me. But as far as the business was concerned, we had this huge gap. And so therefore what really happened is we did not anticipate the changes which took place in the 70s and 80s. What were the changes? He himself had worked to make sure that India was not signatory to what was considered in those days the old Patent Act, which means that in atomic energy, nuclear energy and pharmaceuticals and agrochemicals, we had looked forward to what was called having a patent life of a product only for 7 years and going for compulsory licensing. And he was one of the advocates actually to work for that. But we were so caught up in our own kind of world or megalomania or whatever it was, that the steps which were being taken by the other companies in order to take advantage of this, what were the steps? Step number one, generic exports. At that time, it was very difficult for India to market its products worldwide. But the API, which is actually the raw material from which the finished product is made, that people were making. The Reddys in those days, before they called it Reddy, it was standard laboratories and all of that, used to make 1 crore per ton of ciprofloxacin they used to sell. And we for one decided that we could still stick to some of our old brands and we need not invest so much in manufacturing because the company was cash starved as always, and for us it was a question of maintaining our control if we took in outside money. So clearly we had situations where we did not anticipate the change taking place in those days. While others were putting up excellent manufacturing facilities, we had to subterfuge visitors. We couldn't take them to any of our plants because, as they say, sometimes it's like Naam Mota Darshan Kota. In the sense, we really didn't have anything which was worth talking about. But we were still surviving because of A, the protection which was there in the country, 2, the reputation which was there, and the medical profession, of course, having still a lot of regard and belief. So the other point I learned out of this is that change is inevitable. If you do not anticipate change, change is going to overtake you. And then your chances of succeeding in that are going to be far more remote. Why? Because I think it's a